Dick Cheney was very concerned about someone remotely hacking his pacemaker and causing it to shock him over and over and kill him.
How common it is for hackers to target these devices?
Most people that develop software don't understand cybersecurity.
In theory, you should be able to fix all the bugs, right?
If somebody wanted to kill people and this device is vulnerable, you could taint the hamburger supply chain. When it's tested, it tests negative for E. coli and it goes out through McDonald's. People ingest the hamburger and it kills them.
I would have thought, since there are like public lives at stake here, because it's a hospital, my first step would be to call FBI to investigate the situation.
The FBI said they wouldn't even look at it unless it was over $1 million.
How vulnerable do you think the average hospital is to an attack like this?
Hospitals are 100% vulnerable. We were able to grab the credentials from one of the staff nurses, and then we were able to log into that cloud system as her and siphon patient data.
Say I'm in charge of a hospital and someone hacks into my system and is demanding $1 million. What is my first step?
The first step is really to...
I don't think we want people to start thinking, well, now I can't go to the hospital because these devices aren't safe. So is there any silver lining here?
Eat healthy. Don't get sick.
That's right. Just stay healthy and avoid the hospital. That's the silver lining. That helps on a number of fronts.
Turn off your internet.
Go outside. Go for a run. Yeah.
Spend time in nature. That's the message from this podcast.
I kind of operate from the perspective that my video camera might be on my computer, my microphone might be on, and somebody might be recording it.
We are recording you right now.
I didn't know that.
Do you think cryptocurrencies play a big role in this?
I invested in a company that takes a bunch of other people. We invest in them, they invest in crypto, and their wallet was stolen, and all my money is gone now because all their money is gone. And they can't get it back.
But you have all these superpowers to get to the root cause and what happened?
And you have to assume that your password is going to be stolen from some cloud provider and leaked on the dark web. Any organization we've been hired as white hat hackers to break into, if we've been allowed to use phishing as a tactic, we've always got in.
Usually hospitals that are getting attacked, you're saying they're missing these kind of security mechanisms, and that's the reason they're getting attacked in the first place?
That is like one reason. The other reason is...
In today's episode, we're talking to Christian, a professional hacker and cybersecurity expert.
We'll delve into how hospitals and medical devices are vulnerable to hacking and what you can do to protect your privacy.
Stick till the end to learn how to secure your sensitive information and where to go to see what's already been stolen. Christian, what mission are you on?
I'm on a couple missions. The mission I'm on with my company, which is Blue Goat Cyber, is to secure medical devices. On average, there's 14 devices per hospital bed, and those devices have been very vulnerable to cyber attacks. So even things like a drug infusion pump, which controls the flow rate of a drug that's being pumped into you, there's been vulnerabilities against those where someone could increase the flow rate of the drug. And if you're getting like morphine because you're getting pain relief, if someone increases the flow rate, it could kill you. So to me, it's very tangible. It's more than just stealing credit cards. It's something that matters a lot because I would hate for all the advances in healthcare to be rolled backwards because of these vulnerable medical devices. And this even includes things like implantables, like a pacemaker. I know Dick Cheney, for a while there, was very concerned about someone remotely hacking his pacemaker and causing it to shock him over and over and kill him. So he actually had it removed. So it's a big area that I think needs a lot of attention, much more so than worrying about our credit cards or our health information being stolen.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay.
I would never have thought of medical devices as being like a key cybersecurity threat. How common do you think it is for hackers to target these devices?
There hasn't been like a lot of documented cases. Sometimes the devices have been compromised because they're connected to the hospital environment. So it wasn't necessarily targeted against the device. But with things like directed attacks against somebody like the Dick Cheney with a pacemaker, I think we're going to see more of those sort of attacks occur. And like in the United States, the FDA has made a lot of requirements around cybersecurity for anyone trying to sell a medical device. So the rules are becoming much more stringent. There's much more attention to it now because of all the issues we've had with previous medical devices that didn't go through the same scrutiny.
I wanted to, I had a couple of questions that I wanted to dig deeper. But before that, would you mind defining what cybersecurity is for the layman audience?
Yeah, so cybersecurity is really about reducing the risk of something happening. It's sort of like insurance, and nobody really cares about it until they actually need it. But what we're really doing is pretty much anything that has software where someone has coded the system, they've often coded it with flaws in the software. So cybersecurity is designed to fix those holes in the software and protect that device or that application from people breaking into it. But you can't fix everything. So it's about reducing the risk to an acceptable level for an organization.
Well, why do you say that you can't fix everything? I would say in theory you should be able to fix all the bugs, right?
In theory, from my experience, most people that develop software don't understand cybersecurity. And this is, I think, one of the biggest problems is in school or wherever they learned how to code or how to write the software, they learned how to make things work, how to make the functions work and make it look pretty and all that, but they didn't understand security. So there's a movement now to add security into the curriculum so people that write the code actually understand the security and the vulnerabilities, but most of them don't. So that's why I say it's a hard problem to fix because, and I've ran into this over and over and over, a lot of times I'll be talking to a software developer about a problem that we discovered, and they're like, there's no way you could get into the system using that. And we have to show them that we could actually break into their application through something that they had no idea was a vulnerability. And with my company, like one of my best penetration testers or white hat hackers, he used to be a software developer. And once he became trained in penetration testing and white hat hacking, he realized that almost all the code he wrote in the past was full of holes that somebody could have hacked into.
So going back to the pacemaker hacking, so can you explain how the pacemaker is connected to the outside world where a hacker has an opportunity to hack into it?
Well, any implantable device has to have some sort of wireless connection. And that's for diagnostics. So the physician can read data off the device. It's also for updating the device. That the device probably has a firmware update or something like would need to be updated on the software. So because that wireless functionality is there, it allows somebody like a criminal to wirelessly connect to that device and do something malicious with it. It's not feasible with an implantable device to always take it out if you have to like diagnose it or update it, so that they're always going to have that wireless connectivity.
Right. And so in this particular example, is it connected via Bluetooth or is it what technology is being used? Is it Wi-Fi? What is it?
It's usually Bluetooth, like Bluetooth low emission is the most common for implantables.
Right. So Bluetooth has a very low proximity to it, right? Like you cannot, like someone like 1 mile away cannot hack that device, correct? So it has to be someone near you.
There's been some demonstrations where people have been able to read Bluetooth from a mile away using a high-powered antenna. So it's supposed to be, only 3 meters or whatever, but if you've got the right antenna, you can read it from quite a further distance. And someone's done it from a mile away, actually.
You mentioned that the FDA has put out new regulations for medical devices based on issues that had come up in the past. What were some concrete examples of issues that occurred with medical devices?
The pacemaker is a big one. The Medtronic pacemaker was recalled because of the vulnerabilities of someone being able to wirelessly get into it. Another one was the Hospira drug infusion pump, which, again, wirelessly, people were able to connect to it and change the settings. And there's been a lot of cases that I've worked that, they're not documented, where one of them, for example, because we do a lot of medical device testing, There's a device that we tested that was pretty exploitable, where we could compromise it. And that device took a sample of your blood, diagnosed the blood, and then recommended an antibiotic for you. And the thing with medical devices, if I can alter the algorithm so it gives false results, that's where you could actually cause harm to somebody. Because if somebody has sepsis, meaning their blood is toxic, and the device says they don't have sepsis, then you don't give them the right treatment and they could die. And that same device, for instance, is used in industry to test hamburger. Hamburger, we test it for bacteria like E. coli, salmonella. And because that device is vulnerable, I always think of like scenarios, because I used to be in the military. We used to do attack scenarios. If somebody wanted to kill people and this device is vulnerable, you could taint the hamburger supply chain. When it's tested, it tests negative for E. coli and salmonella. Then it gets released to the public, this hamburger, and it goes out through McDonald's or whatever, and people ingest the hamburger and it kills them. We've had cases where E. coli has killed people, but this is a way someone could do a targeted attack if they wanted to and really cause some havoc. It's kind of like it's terrorism in a different way.
But as of now, there have been no actual cases of targeted attacks against medical devices. Is that correct?
When you do the research, that nothing comes up that says somebody has died as a direct result of a medical device attack. There has been a lot of cases where people have died because of ransomware, although they don't exactly contribute it to ransomware, because if someone arrives that's having a heart attack, arrives to the hospital in an ambulance, and the hospital is undergoing a ransomware attack, their ability to intake that patient is delayed. And that delay, if they're having a heart attack, every second matters. That delay can cause the person to die. There's been a lot of cases like that, but they don't directly attribute it to the ransomware. They'll attribute it to a delay in them being able to intake that patient. Because a hospital or a healthcare provider is very hesitant to say it's their fault that somebody died because of lawsuit reasons. Right. So the same thing with medical device manufacturers. We operate in a world where people are not going to take the responsibility because it opens up a whole legal matter for them.
So I guess part of your job then is to help companies take responsibility for the security of their devices, right? And you mentioned white hat hacking as part of that. Could you explain a little more what that is and how it's utilized? Yeah,
so in the hacking world, there's generally two colors of hats. There's a black hat hacking, which is the cyber criminals. They are the black hats. And there's white hat hacking, which are the good guys, like my company. And the idea is the white hat hackers use the same tactics and techniques and procedures as the black hat hackers. And we're an ally, though. So if we're working with a medical device manufacturer, we're going to use all the tactics that a black hat would use to break into their device. And we break in and then tell them how we got in and how to fix it. And we don't steal the data and sell it on the dark web or anything, because that's what the black hats do. So it's having an ally test your defenses and tell you where they're weak and how to fix them. That's what a white hat hacker does.
I wanted to go back to you mentioned the ransomware attack on a hospital. Can you explain can you break down how a ransomware attack works?
A ransomware attack is really just like any other malicious software. It just has a specific purpose. So typically ransomware gets into an environment because somebody clicks on a phishing email. It's almost always the human element involved. When they click on the phishing email, they either visit a website that infects their computer, or they open up an attachment like a fake PDF that infects their computer. Then the ransomware, once it affects their computer, it starts encrypting all the data on their computer and spreading across their environment. So if it's a hospital, one person gets infected, the ransomware encrypts their computer, goes across the internal network and starts infecting everybody else. and encrypting all of it. And then pretty soon you have this warning on your system that you can't use the system any longer unless you pay this ransom. And the ransom is people have it could be a couple $1,000,000, it could be a few $100,000. The attackers try to figure out like what they think somebody will pay. And the challenge is a lot of organizations don't have a means to recover. So often you're left with a choice of, do I just pay the ransom and hopefully they'll unlock my systems because you're dealing with a cyber criminal, or do I not pay the ransom and somehow find a way to recover? And it seems like relatively simple to recover from ransomware, but it's not. We were called into a client that had ransomware. They decided not to pay the ransom. They had decent backups and they knew how to recover their backups. So what happened is they recovered their backups and restored everything. And then later, and we were called in after the fact to help them because the first company didn't really get to the root of the issue. Later, they got ransomware again. So what happened is the ransomware had been on their systems for a couple months. They didn't know that. And they restored their backups from like a month ago, and then it popped right back up. So it's a challenge for organizations to get to the root of the issue.
So in that scenario, since they decided not to pay the ransom and the ransomware software or the malicious code was still in their backup, so what happened? Like, did they actually have to end up paying? Did they end up paying the ransom, or how did they recover?
They had to go back further after more analysis, like 3 months back. So they lost 3 months worth of data. They didn't want to pay. And the thing is, even if you pay, there's no guarantee that the ransomware cyber criminal is going to unlock your systems. They typically do because that's their business model. But they've also often stolen your data. So the way it really works is they'll hold your systems hostage, but then they steal the data as well. So if you don't pay, any sensitive data they've stolen, they sell it and make money that way. So it's kind of a win-win proposition for them. If you pay, they make money. If you don't pay, they sell your data and they make money that way too.
I see. I wanted to do a thought experiment with you. Like, say I'm in charge of a hospital, right? And someone hacks into my system and is demanding $1 million. So what is my first step? What am I supposed to do at that point?
The first step is really to find out the extent of the problem and verify it is a legitimate problem. I mean, if it only is affecting like one computer, it's not that big a deal, but you have to figure out what the scope of the problem is. And this is where segmenting your environment and putting critical systems on a different network that's isolated from the network that your normal users use is ideal. So I would look at the extent of it first, the scope, and then make some informed decisions.
And assuming that it did infect every system in my hospital, what is my next step?
The next step is to have an incident response, have someone that is trained come in and look at your environment and try to figure out how recoverable it is. So again, we're trying to gather enough data to make an informed decision. So if the ransomware is something that we see in the past, and let's say my team knows how to decrypt it, because there are ways to decrypt certain types of ransomware, then you may make the decision not to pay because you have an ability to recover relatively quickly using decryption keys that someone has gathered or decryption mechanism. And then you also have to find out if the attacker is still connected and active into your environment. So this involves like monitoring outbound connections, because when they install the ransomware and put up the banner, they're also monitoring how you respond, and they may change things based on your response. So there's a lot of variables to really consider in order to make an informed decision.
So I'm actually surprised that you said, well, the first step is to call a company like yours. I would have thought, since there are like public lives at stake here, because it's a hospital, my first step would be to call like FBI or some authority to investigate the situation. Is that not the case?
Usually, the FBI is not going to investigate the scenario and help you with the ransomware. A company, and you may have an internal team or an instant response company would be the first person to call. The FBI, I think it was last week, we had a company that had an incident, and the FBI said they wouldn't even look at it unless it was over $1 million.
Million
And
dollars
something's
of what?
$1 million of fraud. Because this was an incident where someone sent an email and convinced someone to wire money somewhere to a fake account, where the criminal's account, and they reported it to the FBI. But the FBI said, unless it's over $1 million, we don't have the time to mess with it, basically.
Well, but in this case, it's not about money, right? It's about, as you said, people could die if they don't get treatment in the right amount of time frame. So are there certain parameters around that as well, or is totally related to how much money is involved?
I think you should definitely report it to the FBI. I don't think the FBI is going to help you respond to it as quick as a commercial company. They're just not a staff to do that. They'll try to run down the actual criminal, and they may give you some intelligence. Like when we've talked to the FBI before about ransomware, they said, we've seen this ransomware hit these environments before, and this is where it's coming from, and this is what we think you should do. So they do have intelligence on it, because a lot of people report the things to the FBI, but they're not the ones that, I've never seen them, and there could be cases where they actually do this. I've never seen them actually do the technical help for the case to remove the ransomware.
I see. So I'm also, since I have a software engineering background as well. So if an unknown person enters your network, don't we have the ability to log the IP address of that person? So if, for example, if someone from a different country, assuming it's a U.S. hospital, you won't necessarily want any traffic from outside the United States. So if you see any IP addresses from outside the United States, shouldn't you have mechanism in place to stop them right there?
Yes, I used to work with a company that had a device that blocked traffic based on country of origin, and that's a very good point. If the hospital doesn't deal with Russia or China or North Korea or Brazil or any countries that typically attacks come from, they might as well not even allow those IP addresses or traffic from those countries to connect to the hospital. So that is a proactive way of stopping a lot of this, is to only allow attacks, or not allow attacks, but allow traffic from your own country, that or the countries you deal with. And if we were really to narrow it down, most people or most businesses only deal with like one or two countries typically.
Right. Okay. So you would say that usually hospitals and other institutions where they're public facing that are getting attacked, you're saying they're missing these kind of security mechanisms, and that's the reason they're getting attacked in the first place?
That is like one reason. The other reason is we can train people as much as we want to a red in the face to not click on a phishing email. But the people that write the phishing emails are so good, and human nature is, curiosity, or they're going to take advantage of something that's going to get you to take an action. So we need to have a better way of handling that. I think there's this assumption that if we just keep training our staff over and over and over, that they're going to stop clicking on phishing emails, which is the way the ransomware typically gets in. And that's a bogus assumption. We need to assume that the training is not going to work and have different controls in place. We need to assume people are going to click on those phishing emails. So that's where things like segmenting the medical devices are on a separate network over here that is isolated from this network where the nurses work or the staff works. Things like that would prevent the ransomware. Or if the ransomware gets on the environment, it's only going to affect like these systems over here that are not critical systems. And these kind of controls, I think that there needs to be a paradigm shift in the industry, because it's like we just keep doing the same things over and over and over and expecting different results. And that's that training I'm talking about.
Right.
It doesn't work.
Yeah, no, but going back to phishing emails, I feel like if there is an email that is asking you to log in and it's not a legit website, wouldn't the easiest solution would be to just have multi-factor authentication in place? Like they have to enter, like they'll receive a code on their cell phone or like a MFA device that they have to enter the code into. That way, even if it is a phishing email, it has to have another level of security that they have to go through before they can log in.
That is one of the best things to do. I'm a big proponent of multi-factor authentication, like you said. The bottom line is any organization we've done a penetration test against, we've been hired as white hat hackers to break into. If we've been allowed to use phishing as a tactic, we've always got in. Because we'll do things like do some research on the organization and clone a website, like one of their legitimate looking websites, and have a fake log on up there where they put in their credentials, and we scare them to do it. So people do that, and then we have their account credentials and get into their environment. And this could even be a tactic which we've used in the past. Like I send you a LinkedIn invite, and I have a page that looks exactly like LinkedIn. The URL is like LinkedIn but you can't tell it's not LinkedIn. I may use a 1 instead of an I, for instance, or linked -in, because most people don't know. But the page looks exactly the same. You want to connect with this person. You go in there and log in. You think you're logging in. And then we redirect you to the real LinkedIn. But now we have your LinkedIn credentials, and we can start talking to your other LinkedIn contacts and get more information that way. I think people need to be trained. I think awareness is good, but we have to make the assumption that they're going to fall for these tactics. Because like I said, we've never not succeeded breaking into an environment if we're allowed to use phishing.
Right. No, but my point is, like, if every credential required a multi-factor authentication, then your phishing attempts won't work, right?
It depends on the phishing attempt. If the phishing attempt is to send someone to a logon page, we might get their password,
right?
But we don't have the second factor of authentication,
exactly,
like their authenticator on their phone. So yes, that would stop that. And I that's one of the first things I tell people to do is turn on multi-factor authentication on anything. A lot of people don't want to do it because of the inconvenience, and that goes to your kind of risk tolerance. The other thing with phishing, though, is if I send an attachment and they open the attachment and there's a vulnerability in that system, I can still infect them. It doesn't have to be them visiting a website and divulging their password.
Right. No, but that's okay. At least with the hospital style environments, they should have multi-factor authentication in every possible login, right? Like, can you give me a scenario where, assuming I'm running, going back to the same example, I'm in charge of a hospital, all my systems have multi-factor authentication, and you send a file which is infected. How would you get in? Like, you still need MFA to get into any kind of system. Like, are you talking about some kind of vulnerability where you may be able to bypass MFA? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, so I'll give an example. One of the hospitals we did a test on, we sent an email. It was an Excel spreadsheet that had a macro in it, and it was about like 24 layoffs is what we called it. And we had it in there like, this is sensitive data. You have to click on this thing to see the data, and it had an actual list of people that we got from the internet that worked in the hospital that were getting quote laid off. And when they clicked on the button to remove the security so they could see the list of people, that infected their computer. And then what we did is when it infects their computer, it sends an outbound connection to a server that we own. So then we ride that outbound connection back to that computer and can take over the computer. Because most organizations, they're very restrictive of blocking traffic coming in, but they pretty much let everything out. So if we can get someone to open something, infect their computer, it connects to us outbound, and then we can control their computer. And the thing about that scenario is people are very curious. They like to pass things around, and that Excel document got passed around to most of the organization. We ended up infecting most of the organization, and their CEO of the hospital was upset that we used that tactic. She said it was too realistic. I'm like, we're showing you your weaknesses, and we're not going to use a tactic that is so simple somebody's going to realize it's a bogus email or bogus attachment. So that scenario we were able to get in completely.
I wanted to go back to the scenario of the hospital that's been attacked by the ransomware. Now, you mentioned in one of the cases someone had been infected for months, so they lost 3 months worth of data because they didn't want to pay the ransom. I imagine as a hospital administrator, you simply can't lose 3 months worth of data because that would be critical information for patient care. So what do you do in a situation like that? Do you just have to pay them?
You end up having to pay to get your systems restored, but you have to also understand that, as I mentioned before, they still may release your data and sell it on the dark web, even though you paid. And that that's often the case. I remember I used to watch this television show called Chicago Med, and they had an incident in there where they had ransomware in the hospital, and this is very like reality. The hospital wasn't prepared to deal with the ransomware, and one of the doctors just paid the ransomware himself so they could get the systems back online and actually start saving lives again, versus spend all this time where they didn't have access to any of the systems. So often paying the ransomware is the right choice. And I've been asked about this before, and people are always like, you don't want to pay the cyber criminals. But if you're not prepared to deal with it, sometimes that's your only real option, and you hope that they actually follow through and unlock your systems.
So do you also help with negotiating with the cyber criminals on maybe if they're asking for $10 million, can we do you guys negotiate and say, well, the problem is actually not that widespread, we can fix this, we can give you $250K and you can go away, kind of thing? Do you ever deal with that as well?
So I personally don't do that. In the last organization I was part of, the company that bought my previous company, we had staff that's what they did. They negotiated and communicated with the cyber criminals to try to, reduce the ransom price and make sure, to whatever degree of assurance you can have, that they would actually decrypt if we paid them $400,000 instead of $2 million in one case.
I see. Okay.
How vulnerable do you think the average hospital is to an attack like this? And I'm also thinking of other critical infrastructure sectors, like, say, power companies or other public infrastructure. How much of an issue is this?
I think hospitals are, with rare exception, 100% vulnerable. The challenge of the hospital is it's a public place that's open 24/7. So it's hard to physically lock things down as well. And that's another way that people get into a hospital, is physically go into there and plant something on a system. And hospitals, my girlfriend's a nurse, there's HIPAA requirements, but the reality is the doctors and nurses rarely know that much about technology. They just know how to use it to get their job done, which is caring for the patients. So they often leave systems unlocked. They will fall for phishing emails and things like we talked about. So I think hospitals are 100% vulnerable, probably more vulnerable than any other sector. You mentioned like the power energy sector. They are more secure than hospitals.
I see. So if a hospital, someone who runs a hospital is listening to this, what would be the steps, precautionary steps they can take to make their system more secure?
One of them would be the multi-factor authentication on whatever systems there could be. Like if it's an electronic medical record system, make sure they have multi-factor authentication turned on, because we've been able to hack into one of those because they didn't have it turned on. So that would have stopped that. The other thing is to segment their environment to make sure the critical devices like the surgical robots, the patient monitoring devices are not on the same network as the staff computers, to make sure that's segmented as much as possible. The other thing I would say is to train your staff about the phishing emails, but also realize the training may not be as effective as you think it's going to be. But I would still train them. I mean, that's required for hospitals through HIPAA. And then the other thing is to make sure you have backups of all your critical systems. But you have to practice restoring those backups and restoring the systems. A lot of people have backups, but they never practice restoring the systems. And then when a crisis happens, they realize that they don't actually know how to restore their systems, or the backups don't work. So having the backups and practicing some sort of incident response, a tabletop exercise, I would say, would help you with that scenario. So if you do those things, you're going to greatly reduce your risk that something would happen. And then even if something does happen, which is probably still going to happen, you have a better likelihood of recovering from it.
I see. What are your thoughts on moving to the cloud, like AWS or Google Cloud Platform? Since they inherently have a lot of customers on their cloud, so they take security very seriously. So if a hospital, like a local hospital, would offshore all of their data responsibilities to a well-known cloud provider, wouldn't that help with most of these scenarios that we're talking about?
So a lot of the hospitals do use like Epic or some sort of a electronic medical record system that's in the cloud. And it does help if they turn on a multi-factor authentication. There's been hospitals, I remember one specifically is a couple years ago. We were able to grab the credentials from one of the staff nurses, and then we were able to log into that cloud system as her and siphon patient data off that way. We didn't actually steal the data, but we're showing how it could have been done. So if they had the multi-factor authentication turned on, that would have stopped that, because we would have had to have the second factor of authentication. And we talked about that as being a solution for a lot of this, and it is, and it's amazing that so many people don't enable that. And I think the main reason is inconvenience.
Right. I think Apple has kind of solved this problem. At least that's my opinion. Basically, they use like the face recognition technology. So you only have to enter the multi-factor authentication code if it fails the face recognition. So that way, you're never entering it unless someone else is trying to use your computer or cell phone. So what are your thoughts on the face recognition technologies and how they can help with this?
So I think some sort of biometric scan like your face is useful, but those have been bypassed as well. I'm not, I don't have an iPhone, and I don't use facial recognition on my phone. I'm not a big fan of it. I know my girlfriend has a friend who suspected her boyfriend was cheating on her, and she wanted to get into her boyfriend's phone to verify this, and he had the facial recognition turned on. And I thought that this would not work, but she said, why don't you just show a picture of him to the phone? And she showed a picture, and somehow it actually worked, and she was able to get in the phone. But I know they've changed that. Supposedly we have to have certain movements. So I think it's valuable, But when I've tried it though, I've had to look at my phone too long. It's like it's more of a delay thing where it's been an inconvenience for me. So I decided not to use it. But I think things like facial recognition, I think if we improve the technology more and they could do it faster, I mean, it's improving a lot. You go to the airport now. Last time I flew from the Middle East in the U.S., they just took a picture of me and up came my information. We're getting better at the facial recognition stuff than we have in the past. So I think as long as that continues to improve and there's not a lot of delay authenticating, that could be a solution as well.
Yeah.
Although I imagine there are going to be a lot of people who are paranoid about having that
Privacy.
Yeah, that system in place.
Yeah, people are very leery about certain biometrics, like even like enrolling with your fingerprint to get into a computer. People don't want to give up their fingerprints because if your fingerprint is stolen from the system, then that fingerprint could be used for other things. There's even been cases where we have super high def cameras now, and if people have waved at the camera like this, criminals have been able to lift the fingerprint off of your video and get into systems that way if they're that intent on getting in.
Yeah.
Right. Have you seen that happen, like as one of your cases for your clients, or is that like a story that you heard?
I've heard of that happening. I've been able to do what's called the gummy bear attack on a clients before, where they have a biometric reader where someone puts their finger on it on a reader and it opens the door. So what you can do is take a gummy bear, push it against the reader after that, and lift their fingerprint off of the reader, and then you can go in there and get into the facility that way.
Oh wow! So it sounds like it's you need like multiple biometric, features to make a more secure system, right? So you need maybe face, fingerprint, and a password or something like that, where if you want to really make it foolproof, correct?
Correct. Like that facility, they had just a fingerprint, which is a single factor of authentication. We've been talking about multiple factors. So my solution was, a recommendation then was, put the fingerprint, but also have someone have to type in a PIN, a 6-digit PIN or something. So even if someone steals your PIN, the likelihood of them having your fingerprint is pretty slim. If someone steals your fingerprint, the likelihood of them having the PIN is pretty slim because, again, the multi-factor authentication, which we've talked about quite a bit, solves like almost all of these problems.
Right.
Doesn't make them go away necessarily. There's ways to circumvent it, but it certainly makes it much more difficult for someone to break into something.
Right.
So as someone who's listening to this now, like someone not in technology, who's maybe becoming paranoid, the key takeaway here then is to turn on multi-factor authentication on all of your devices.
For every login, yeah. That's what I do, yeah.
Yeah, so if you turn that on, it doesn't matter if you have like a lame password because you have to have the second factor. And you have to assume that your password is going to be stolen from some cloud provider and leaked on the dark web. So if you use that same password in all of your systems and someone steals it from one of your systems you use, then all of your systems are going to be compromised.
Yeah.
So that multi-factor authentication definitely solves that challenge.
Yeah, I remember one time I had this random airline, I think it's like somewhere in Japan or something, that only requires a PIN for their password if you want to log into their frequent flyer website. So it's a 4-digit PIN, but they also require you to have a multi-factor, like a text to your cell phone to log in. So they won't do a regular password, just a 4-digit PIN and a text to your cell phone. So I think it was like a couple of years back where I got like 20 texts in a row. Someone trying to log into my account. They figured out my PIN code, but they couldn't get in because of the passcode. So for like next few days, I got like dozen of text messages, and they couldn't get it. So multi-factor authentication is very powerful. I think that if someone is listening to this, and the one key takeaway would be to just turn on MFA for everything, right?
Yes, and I think it's also from an awareness perspective. you can go to a website. It's called Have I Been Pwned, like PWNED. You can put in like your email address, and it will tell you all the data breaches that have been associated with your email address and what information the hacker stole. So it gives you a pretty clear idea what has been stolen of yours, and then you have some knowledge about what you need to change based on what's been stolen. Because if you use the same password on LinkedIn, for instance, as you use on everything else, you don't have multi-factor authentication turned on, and that password is stolen from LinkedIn via data breach, then the attacker is going to assume that password will work on Gmail, on Office 365, on everything else, with your username being your email address.
Right. You since you see these attacks all the time, you have a company that deals with it. Is there a particular country where these attacks most originate from?
I would say there's three major countries. China is one of the biggest ones. So is Russia, and so is North Korea. Those are the three big ones.
I see. And are there like known IP addresses attached to them, or I'm guessing they use like VPNs or some kind of other technology to mask their real IP addresses?
Right. So the way to get around like your source IP address is ideally, and this is what a lot of attackers do, is I compromise a system, let's say in Iceland. Then from there, I compromise a system in Brazil. And then from there, I compromise a system in France. And from that system, I then attack a system, my real target, in the United States. So it looks like the attack came from France. And the thing is, if you do this through countries that don't like each other or don't cooperate very well, then it makes it very challenging for the country that was attacked, like in the United States in this scenario, to trace where the attack actually came from. So we have to go off of like, well, this threat group, these cyber criminals use these specific tactics. So we think it's them, but we don't actually know. So that's a way of making it very difficult from a forensic perspective to trace back where the attack actually came from. Because all those countries would have to be willing to cooperate as well.
Ah, I see. So if you reach out to France and France is like, well, we're not going to help you out with this, then you're out of luck. You cannot trace back to what the source of that France IP is.
Or France may say, we'll help, but the next country in the chain may not be willing to help.
Oh, I see. I mean, can they also like maybe hack someone in the United States, like someone in Kansas, and then use that IP address to attack a hospital in New York City?
100%. Then that happens all the time as well. Mm-hmm.
I see.
And I used to be in the military, in the DoD, Department of Defense, and we would go through scenarios where someone would compromise like one military installation, and then from there attack another one. But those two installations had to communicate with each other, so you can't cut off all communication. But it forces you to think about like, what will we do in this scenario? And I think that's what a lot of hospitals don't do, is look at a scenario and how they would respond to it. I think that really helps fill in the gaps of your response and the gaps of your team to know how to respond and who you contact and what that triage looks like.
Right.
I wanted to quickly go back to the perspective of someone listening who's not in technology and who's maybe now becoming a little paranoid because we're talking about how vulnerable hospitals are. So I don't think we want people to start thinking, well, now I can't go to the hospital because all these devices aren't safe. So is there any silver lining here? Or is there any kind of comforting message?
Eat healthy. Don't get sick.
Like
that's right. Just stay healthy and avoid the hospital. That's the silver lining. that helps on a number of fronts.
Turn off your internet. Eat healthy.
Go outside. Go for a run. Yeah.
Spend time in nature. That's the message from this podcast.
Just well, I guess the message is, there are vulnerabilities. Like I live in Phoenix right now, and we have autonomous driving cars here. I take them all the time. I always think, well, what if this thing is compromised and it speeds up and gets in an accident, it could kill me. So I think as long as you understand that there are risks with anything, but the likelihood of stuff happening is there, but it's probably pretty small if you go visit the hospital. And even if something does happen, the hospital is probably better equipped to deal with it now than they were in the past. Like ransomware is a fairly common thing now, and most organizations are prepared to deal with it much better than they were even last year.
Do you think cryptocurrencies play a big role in this? Because whenever there's a ransomware attack, obviously they're going to demand money in like Bitcoin and not in like US dollars, correct?
Typically, you can track the crypto transactions often, because it's based on blockchain technology a lot of times. So you have to you can trace it back. So there are ways to circumvent that as well, but typically the payments are done in crypto. I know people that are able to track where the payment went, though that's their job. But cryptocurrency is not foolproof either. I have some investments. I had the investments in a company that invests in cryptocurrency, and the hackers stole their wallet. So all my money that I invested in the company disappeared, and they can't get it back. They're trying to work with the FBI to get this back, and the FBI is like, we really can't help you. So, yeah.
Oh, did that happen to you?
It happened to me. I invested in a company that takes a bunch of other people. We invest in them. They invest in crypto, and their wallet was stolen, and all my money is gone now because all their money is gone, and they can't get it back.
But you have all these superpowers to get to the root cause, and what happened? You didn't use your superpowers.
Yeah, there's sometimes there's only so much time in the day. I might be able to spend a year on it and maybe get the money back. In this case, I don't think it was that much. I think I only invested like $10,000. If I invested 10 million, I might have a different perspective on it.
Does it ever happen where you actually are able to trace back to the real culprits and like say they're somewhere in Russia? Like if you does it ever happen where you're able to get to the point where you can not only identify the original source IP address, but also the individuals behind it? Does it ever happen?
It's happened in the past with Bitcoin, where people have been able to trace the transaction to an individual. I don't know. I haven't been involved in any cases recently where I know we've been able to trace that back. This was several years ago.
Right. So it does happen. So like if any bad guys are listening to this podcast, like even if they do attack and we're able to trace them back, but they reside in Russia, like what can we do? Like since they're in a different country, we cannot like sue them or start a case against them.
Yes, and that's the problem. I mean, we have organizations like Interpol that can help some, but if the attacker that stole all your stuff, your cryptocurrencies in China, good luck. In some countries like North Korea, hacking is just part of what they do. They don't think it's illegal. It's the same thing with China. So if we're going to go over there and try to arrest them for stealing our information, it's not going to work because it's just jurisdiction issues.
So I know there are a lot of people who are really worried about their privacy online, especially in the context of all these attacks. How are data privacy laws working these days? Is it impacting the cybersecurity space at all? Is it making us any more secure?
Or is it making it harder?
It's making it harder, yes. California has the CCPA, Europe has GDPR. And with GDPR, for instance, one of the big things with GDPR is you have the right to request from any company all of your data they have on you. And then you have the right to say, I want to be forgotten. I want you to prove to me you've erased all the data about me. So you have the right for them to show everything they've collected and for them to prove they've erased it. And for a company to be able to, a provider, to be able to handle that data that succinctly is very challenging. And prove they deleted it is very challenging. So the cost goes up greatly for companies that collect data. And then on the other side, a lot of companies in the U.S., because they don't want to have to obey by all these rules, simply don't want to do business with any European citizens anymore. If their model is like, that's only 5% of our business. So they're just going to be like, we don't want to spend this much money to make our system compliant with GDPR. So the way around it, we're just not going to deal with people from Europe. So there's that aspect. And then the other aspect is these systems are abused. So there's been lots of cases with GDPR, for instance, where someone has claimed that they're a different person and asked for all the information about that person. So now they've used it to receive personally identifiable information from somebody else because the organization didn't validate that they were really who they said they were. In my opinion, it doesn't really solve anything, at least at the maturity level we are right now with these privacy rules. I think it opens up a lot of bigger financial costs for organizations and a lot of room for abuse, really.
I see.
So for someone who's really interested in keeping their privacy, it just comes back down again to multi-factor authentication, or is there any other tips?
Well, we have to look at it realistically. I'm sure most people that are listening have got some sort of email or letter that their data was stolen. It probably was from a healthcare provider. So the fact of the matter is, as much as we want to keep our information private, it's already all been stolen. I mean, I've got so many letters and so many things from even the Office of Personnel Management in the government that has all of my records. So somebody already has all of my data. So I think we're being a little bit overly paranoid about the privacy stuff. So you have to just assume your data has been stolen. And I mentioned that website, Have I Been Pwned? You can go there to see what data about yours has been stolen and what data breaches. And I think going back to the MFA, the multi-factor authentication, that certainly will prevent more data from being stolen. But I still think we need to have the awareness that most of the stuff about us has already been stolen. Our medical records, our credit information, and people put in stuff like on a DNA site or try to figure out your family tree. DNA has been stolen when you submit your DNA somewhere to try to figure out your lineage. I mean, a lot of stuff has already been stolen. I'm not trying to sound pessimistic, but we have to be realistic about what's really going on in the world.
Right.
I kind of operate from the perspective that my video camera might be on on my computer. My microphone might be on, and somebody might be recording it.
Actually,
the microphone
right
on
now.
The TV might be on. What's that?
We are recording you right now.
I didn't know that. Not aware of that. But there's been cases, if people don't think about it, where a hacker hacks into your system and turns on your microphone, records sensitive conversations, zips it up, and sends it off somewhere else. So we have to have the awareness that these things are probably happening right now to us, and operate from that perspective a little more than just trying to prevent everything. I mean, we still want to prevent stuff, but we also have to have the awareness that we're probably already compromised to some degree.
Yeah. One lingering question I wrote down, I didn't get a chance to ask you regarding the medical devices. So when you were talking about the fact that you need encryption, like Bluetooth, for Bluetooth devices, you need encryption, you need some kind of pairing mechanism to prevent that device from being hacked. I would have imagined that would be there would be some kind of a law that you can't even create a medical device unless you have these 4 security features built in. Is that not the case?
It is the case now. The FDA just late last year came out with more guidance about cybersecurity. And there's this thing called the SBOM, the software bill of materials the FDA wants now. So any software that is installed in a medical device, the entire lineage of that software has to be crystal clear, because there's been attacks across the world where a specific piece of source code that other vendors used in multiple products was compromised, and then all these products were compromised. That attack, like one comes to mind, is Shell Shock. So they are doing a lot of things to make sure the software is secure, the controls are in place for like the Bluetooth, the encryption, and the entire attack surface is looked at with a microscope now for medical devices. And before it was kind of just ignored to a large degree. So before you can sell a medical device, you have to go through a lot of scrutiny and submit a lot of documentation to the FDA right now.
Okay. Well, there's your silver lining.
Yeah, I was going to say, I sort of wanted to.
This is a good way to end the podcast now.
I wanted to end with sort of my takeaway on this again, since we've been talking about how all of this may be making people a little paranoid, but my takeaway here is there are a lot of smart people that are working to make these devices more secure, that the actual likelihood, if you are a regular patient going into a hospital, the actual likelihood that any of your devices are going to be hacked is probably very, very low. It's, the risk
they're getting a lot more secure. Yes.
I would actually add on to this silver lining. So I have a Dyson, right? Which is, if people don't know, it's like a super fancy heating and cooling device, but it's also like it has a filter built in, and it's like a bladeless fan, right? So I bought this device like few years back, and recently I got a notification that they're turning off the Wi-Fi feature on my device, and I was like, "What? I paid like $700 for this." So it turns out there's some kind of a law where I was able to control my heat settings from anywhere in the world because it's connected through Wi-Fi, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I turn on my Dyson and say, well, set the temperature to 74 degrees, right? I can no longer do that. So I can only use my local remote to do it, because I'm guessing if someone hacks into my Wi-Fi, they can turn all my Dyson devices and turn them on to like 90 degrees. Or something, and raise my heating bill.
Although why a hacker would want to just play around with the temperature in your house.
But there are like some laws that's preventing Dyson from doing that.
It's because somebody probably did that, and maybe started a fire. I don't know. Somebody probably
result in overheating.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, it might result in a fire from overheating. So it is a security thing. So it is. Things are improving.
Yeah. So you should still go to the hospital if you're sick. Thank you so much for being with us today, Christian. A lot of great information here. Hopefully helpful to everyone who's listening. But if anyone wants to learn more, or if they happen to run an organization that wants to look into improving their cybersecurity, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, they can visit my company website, Blue Goat Cyber, and they can contact me through there. And they can find me on LinkedIn and pretty much any social media as well.